And we're back.
Welcome to episode 249 of No Direction, the No Direction Network's Pathfinder news, reviews, and interviews podcast. I'm Brian Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perram.
Now, Perram, if you've ever read a published adventure from Pathfinder, and I know that you have, from Paizo for Pathfinder, anyway, you know that it recommends tables of 4 to 6 players. Not everyone has reliable access to 4 to 6 players on a regular basis. Not every story needs such a large group to tell it. So we have 2 guests tonight to offer advice for those who want to play Pathfinder, but want or need smaller groups. Those guests are designer Quinn Murphy of Thought Crime Games. Hello, Quinn.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, how you doing?
Doing great.
All right, we'll get right back to why you're doing so great in a minute. But first, we also have to introduce Tommy of Black Dragon Gaming on YouTube. Hi, Tommy.
Hey, buddy, what's up?
Phew, same as I told Quinn. Nothing much.
Fair enough.
I am excited about this topic. This is not something I would have thought of on my own. It was recommended by Vanessa Hoskins from the network. And specifically, Quinn, she was saying that you are designing something called Paragon Mode for Pathfinder. So we're going to get into Paragon Mode in a little bit. But first, how did you get to Pathfinder?
I've been, gaming for like a zillion years. I didn't follow Pathfinder First Ed that much. Like I was just like, by the time Pathfinder came, I was just kind of, I had my full of like sort of 3.5. But like Pathfinder 2 came around and I wanted to check it out. And it was like really like the changes they made were like, for me, kind of like perfect. And then I just started, I started playing, started getting really like into it. Sort of soon after, got my first quest to design. I did archaeology in Aspenthar, and then have gotten a bunch of other stuff, and just sort of like, it's just sort of, I enjoy working with the system, but then also have fallen in love with Galarian. So I just love like working on the projects and like researching and like going and like digging like really deep into the lore and everything like that. So yeah, I've just been sort of, and I end up talking about it all the time on Twitter these days. So.
And what got you into gaming before you found Pathfinder?
Like my very short origin story is like my brother used to play it. My brother's about 7 years older, and he used to play advanced D&D back in the day, where those books were people who are just getting started now could not imagine how not kid friendly like first edition advanced D&D was, right? And so I couldn't even look at the books for a long time, and I was super curious about it in first grade. And then he went when he was about 18, he went and discovered life outside of role-playing games, and so then that was my opportunity.
Not familiar.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I don't know what that is, but I hear it's nice. But I went like right for his books. I was like, okay, mine. It was really it was really interesting because when I started, I didn't even have the GM's the Dungeon Master's Guide, so I had to like reverse engineer like half the rules, and I guess this is sort of foreshadowing to game design. And then sort of started playing, and then just I've played D&D, like White Wolf, I've played just so much stuff since then.
And Tommy, you are one of we've got like a whole group of YouTube Pathfinder enthusiasts that have sprung up since second edition came out, and you're one of the prominent names in that group. So what was it about Pathfinder that attracted you, and what made you want to create content on YouTube for it?
For me, what attracted me to Pathfinder was the like accessibility at the time within my gaming groups. Like I'm from a very small town in Missouri, and my first experience with TTRPGs, if anyone remembers the like $10 jewel cases at Walmart, the 3.5 Temple of Elemental Evil CRPG, which is super good if you haven't played it, by the way. But like, it's like that, Neverwinter Nights, Baldur's Gate, get all of these things, really like these things, and then eventually go to a game store, here's a bunch of people playing Pathfinder, and then it's just off to the races. Flash forward 3 years or so, I decided I'm gonna start making like content on YouTube about it and see like what I can throw to the wall and make stick. And then it was literally on my birthday that they announced the second edition playtest in that blog. And at the time, I knew what I wanted to do. I had a lot of free time. Tui looked really exciting, and we just went on from there. And I never really saw a reason to drop it.
How would you sum up your Black Dragon gaming content?
Oh God, a lot. It's changed a lot over the years. At first, it was just there are a lot of races in the back of the bestiary that no one plays. Let's talk about Astaboy and why you should play them at your table. Haha. And then like as the arc of the channel does this, the Patreon does this, and the amount of games that I'm running does this, which makes the amount of time I have to edit a video do this. So at the moment we're just like character optimization. The like Pathfinder YouTubers in general right now are all trying to like come together and gas each other up, which means my format is starting to change a little bit, and it's a little less, here's a new ancestry from Tui. Let's talk about the rolls D8 Azur Kenny this week. Waha! And more like, here's what somebody is talking about. Let's talk about that and what is in the system and kind of thing. And then just like a character optimization video once a week, because that's what the people support me on Patreon for.
Sorry, I was just checking something that was happening on Twitch. Somebody got timed out for sharing a link, which I will get to in a second. Quinn, we were talking about Paragon Mode. What is Paragon Mode, and why are you developing it?
Paragon Mode, which I will just shout out to Vanessa. Vanessa actually helped name it for me because I'd been talking about it for a while on Twitter, and I was just like, okay, like was calling it, one-on-one mode, solo mode. Like I had a bunch of names that I like hated, and it was just like, please, people, help me out. And after like getting a whole bunch of things, Vanessa just was like, oh, Paragon Mode. And it was like, oh my God, that is like perfect. So we went with it. So thank you, Vanessa. And Paragon Mode is basically a version of, is really kind of like a sort of add-on overlay for Pathfinder rules. So you can play one-on-one. Sort of my goal in working on it was to have something that me and my son could play one-on-one, and I wanted him to be able to make a character, but I didn't want to make him some weird Franken character that didn't really look like a Pathfinder character at the end of the day, and then try and take him to a group, and then, okay, cool, here's the actual rules for the game. I wanted to teach him the game, and then have something that I could sort of almost like an exo character that I could just take off, and then he'd have like a normal Pathfinder character to go play with, me, my partner, and my friends when he was playing. So we just started kind of working on it there. So it's really kind of like another, I've been working on Paragon Mode as kind of like you have the exploration mode, encounter mode, those things is sort of like a superset mode. And sort of things have a Paragon trait. So everything. So the distinction is when you get these sort of, when you're in Paragon Mode, you get these different things with a Paragon trait that sort of bolt onto the character pretty simply. And then when you're done and in group play, all the Paragon trait stuff goes away, and you just have a normal character there. And so far, playing with my son and working on some stuff has worked pretty well. We've been going through the beginner box so far with no mod. I didn't touch anything to the adventure, and it's actually been going through. There's like a good amount of challenge, but also it's like doable. He's not just getting, he's not mopping the floor with anything or just getting completely mopped up.
So I was under the impression Paragon Mode was a full modification and it's just for full solo Pathfinder. I didn't make the connection with mode that it was a fourth mode of play. So what are some of the things that get the Paragon tag that allows you to play this solo version of Pathfinder?
So the approach here, the philosophy I'm going with in the sort of playtest mode is that one of the things you get with a group is a certain level of action economy, right? Like you get, for the group of 4, you get 12 actions per turn. right? And the game is sort of built around that assumption. And so you can't really. It would be really weird to have one character with 12 actions in a turn, right? Like that would feel very unpathfinder. So what you get is sort of like a sort of like a sort of an overall paragon. Like it's good to think of this as sort of like a really interesting free archetype that you get in solo mode. So you get sort of your default thing, and instead of competing with economy, it gives you efficiency, right? So it just makes you you get like a default like bonus like +3 to all of your defenses, which in play and it doubles your hit points. So it makes you pretty durable. Like anything that is your level has you don't get hit very much by those things, but you still sort of feel it. But then also you get sort of Paragon Feats, but Paragon Feats are for solo play. I think the main goal is not necessarily the challenge. There you do want some challenge, but it's really kind of you want to drive this narrative. Like, hey, what do we do here? What do we do next? And you want sort of to add narrative. So you get Paragon Feats that can represent some special ability or like another character, right? My son has a companion called Rodolfo, and rather than stat out Rodolfo and then just give another character to play, Rodolfo is just represented with like a feat called helping stab, which basically it's just auto. One of the other things is it's just auto damage, right? So it's rather than giving another action, he can just pick for like once a turn he gets to use a Paragon action. So he can go, hey, Rodolfo, stab that guy, and he just does like 1d6, 1d4 to somebody to help him out and makes him flat-footed, stuff like that. So it has this narrative component to it. So he has a friend, and then it sort of gives him this stuff that he would sort of need in lacking the actions.
Can you give an example of a Paragon Mode encounter, or however you would describe just a playing in Paragon Mode, like an example of what you do?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll so like I was saying, we've been going through the beginner box. So it's really just, he has a catfolk druid that he wanted. My son loves cats. So, and it's, him. And then we made up, we just, before we started, it was like, hey, do you have like a buddy? And we made up this dwarf rogue called Rodolfo that joins him. And then when we play, we just start the encounters as normal. Like it has actually been really pretty regular Pathfinder. The only thing he gets he gets his 3 actions that he takes normal, and then he has each turn he has 1 additional action, like a Paragon action that he can use for those Paragon things. So he might, give an action to his animal companion to go attack something, cast a spell, and then with his Paragon action go Rodolfo, stab that guy, and then we have like a little reaction and Rodolfo does damage to something, right? And then the enemies react, and you just sort of the turns play otherwise like normal Pathfinder. But just the character is resilient enough to survive without like needing all of this other stuff.
And is the idea you're making it more or less to accommodate your son, and then you'll flesh it out beyond those specific needs?
Yeah, I mean, I've been working like I'm this week got kind of caught up, but I've been like actually writing a draft. Like I actually have different flavors of so like Paragon, right? Like the 2 ones I have right now is one person who when they're not with a normal sort of party of PCs, they kind of have all these other buddies that they call, right? And so their feats sort of represent all their friends that they have. And then another one who's like basically a Wolverine type, right? Like, I'm a loner, leave me alone. So I just have these sort of other abilities. And just giving the framework of the different types of extra feats that represent these abilities or companions that you can use.
So you did not go for the low-hanging fruit of how to play one-on-one Pathfinder with your son. You immediately saw like, all right, so I need a subsystem, and it's going to be bigger than just what I'm playing now, but I'm making the subsystem I need. Like that, I admire your ambition, and it's really fascinating that that's the direction you went in.
Sorry.
No, go. So I was wondering, we've talked about the solution and rather impressive solution that is Paragon system for this. So what it's addressing problems, but what are the problems with why can't we just throw one character to the wolves, or why do some of the easier options or more obvious options, and they don't, I know they don't work? Why can't I just why are the difficulties you face when suddenly instead of 4 players you've got 1 or 2?
I mean, for me, it comes down to just, the system is made such that monsters hit kind of hard, they hit kind of well, and so they really need the system's expecting a group of people to like wail on stuff. And spend like a certain level of actions to take those out, and when you start taking those actions away, like every miss becomes sort of magnified, and then also you have one person then taking all the stuff that was meant to be sort of split up amongst multiple people. It just sort of you take that sort of multiplier from 4 to 1, and things get pear-shaped fast.
What is your ultimate goal for Paragon Mode?
Honestly, I want a tool that people can use to, like, if they want to just play with their partner or friend, like just take an AP off the shelf and not touch it, like not do anything to it really, and basically be able to like play it and have like a great time with just like a one-on-one.
How old's your son?
My son is 9.
Okay. I know listeners have heard me talk over the last year about trying to introduce my 6-year-old, well, now 6, she was 5 at the time, to RPGs and just looking at my different options. And so the idea of Paragon Mode on the beginner box is something that takes some of my existing plans and might make it a little more feasible. So this is something I'm going to be following, and I'm going to stay in touch with you just to see how it develops.
Okay, yeah.
All right, well, we'll get back to you about more of your gaming experience and how you've been running with smaller groups. But Tommy, you've been patient. Thank you.
Again,
when we're talking about small gaming groups, I think most of us weren't expecting everyone to make a whole new system for playing Pathfinder just to accommodate their groups. But there are times where you will not be able to get that 4-player recommended gaming group number. And like you were saying, you're from a smaller town. So how have you managed to accommodate players when it's a gaming group of 2 to 3 players?
Generally speaking, what I do, and like that's still a thing I face present day. Like on Sundays right now, I'm running a old like Frog Guide Games module called the Slumbering Tsar, which is this very big, angry mega dungeon where like the attrition rate's gonna be real high, and I have 3 people in it. So it's something I definitely deal with all the time. And I do my best to just like not focus on the problems that I have in and of that, and more like what are the good things involved in this. Like, for example, and I wanted to make a joke about this, but I didn't have the time to write the joke. And also it's just like objectively true that in a lot of editions of games, there are some classes that like one should not play at a full stock table. This was the part where I was going to say like hashtag all summoners, and it would have been super funny, but it's also like real true. You can, in a smaller group, there are things that you can focus on that would normally just take a bunch of time away from player 4, 5, 6, the fighters who are sitting in the back watching the summoned fighters do their job and then feeling sad about it, right? And you also get to, with a smaller group, you get to focus more in on the stories of like those characters rather than in my prep time, like I got to think about what the investigator, paladin, sorcerer, rogue, 5th class here, like all that they have given me and how to put a cohesive narrative together. Rather, like, here's a microscope. Today I have a gunslinger and a barbarian. And I can, like, they have given me this, and they want to accomplish that and that. So we lean in real hard, and the spotlight stays on them. They get to do more stuff. When I GM for people who are a little more like less role play focused and a little more like gaming focused, they also, I guess I won't necessarily say they seem to like it a lot, but another like real truth of the RPGs, depending on how one like divides their wealth at the table, is the less people who show up, the less the loot split is, ergo the more that you can get like on you, which is certainly quite helpful in a game where like somebody didn't show up and now we have to go handle this thing. Oopsie doo, we're out of cleric. Now we can afford more potions or like wands and other editions or da 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 da. But it also, like, there are some things that people want to do that will often be gated behind, like, my build doesn't go off until I get blank. And then when the money is
flanking.
Divided, exactly. Well, you got 2. You'll be fine. There it is. Just don't bring the rogue. Or like, I remember I put it in the loot table for a paladin I'm GMing for right now, and I always forget the name of this shield. My brain calls it Staple Shield of 2nd edition with way too much hardness. And I'm just I think it's like Sturdy Shield, but it was a real expensive item that is easier for him to access because they were at the time 3. It takes a little bit of like back work as well, but like on the one hand, I hear Paragon Mode and I'm like, what do you mean I don't have to rewrite every encounter? Wowie. And I also hear Mass Effect, to speak frankly, every time it's like Paragon Mode, I'm like, how long till remake again? Soon. But like, I enjoy as it is digging into things that are written, changing them for like what people have brought to the table anyway. So like, if people have showed up with, if I have a party of 3 and that party of 3 is really well kitted to fight this thing, but not this thing, I can change that second thing to something else that suits them a little more. And just like, in so doing, put a lower level monster in or less monsters in, or perhaps both, right? Such that they can still survive and thrive. And it's not just, sorry, kids, you didn't have the action economy. Here's your next character sheet. And loop ad nauseam.
Now you're talking about classes. What makes a good class for a smaller group? Is it someone that's got multiple niches like the champion? Or is it someone that's like super focused on a single thing like the fighter?
I think it could be either, if I'm honest. Another thing I notice is the bigger the group gets, the longer the what's the meme? We spend 45 minutes talking about the plan and then do not do the plan. Right? Like
45 minutes is not the version I heard.
3 hours. Sorry, guys, session's over. See you in a week where we'll argue about this more. But like, the more people you have in the group, the more like this side wants to go loud, this side wants to go quiet. So a very specialized niche thing like your stealth-based rogues, rangers, so on and so forth, can be a little more maneuverable and like do the thing they want to do without like the barbarian and the champion are just kind of like throwing dice, building dice towers, waiting for the secret mission to be done and the gate to be open kind of thing. But that said, that something that's a little more defensive focus also, or like broad, I guess, is helpful for those things as well, to cover more bases at once. Something much like the champion. Though I suppose like in a smaller group, there may be less people for you to champion's reaction at, but having the big armor certainly helps when everybody is flanking around you and stabbing through it.
Now, you did say that fewer people does mean everyone gets more attention. And then you also said that in combat, there's a lot more risk reward because, you know, there's fewer people doing the fighting. How do your players react to that balance?
it kind of depends. Sometimes there'll be people like, hey, can we bring in a fourth person? Hey, do you know anyone? And then I'll like kick something out. Hey, I need a body. And then we'll bring it in. There are some people who just enjoy the challenge. And there are some people who like pacing gets a lot faster in a smaller group. And a lot of times when it's like, we're in town X and time has come to role play, I'm going to hit you and you and you and you. In a bigger group, that can take longer, and the bigger a group gets, the less mobile it becomes. So I've definitely had a lot of people in my time who just like show up, do the thing, okay, cool, go on to the next thing. And in smaller groups, that happens, like the play cycle happens a lot faster.
I find that with smaller groups, you're less on rails too. The plot takes more unexpected turns, and they tend less to just what's the next plot hook, so we don't have to argue about it.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then like you can get off the rails a lot easier if you definitely know like this is the thing I want to do. But the other people in my party can't do that. And I want to be courteous at the table. But in like a smaller group where those people might not necessarily exist, you get more time to explore that. Again, trying to like, every time I GM in the less than ideal situation, I try to just like focus on the positives as hard as I can, because they're like almost always there. And then it's just like, make sure the math is turned down so I don't accidentally eat somebody with too many ghouls because they didn't bring the cleric, right?
And you say less than ideal situation, but like, I think over half of my hours of all gaming have been with either one-on-one or one-on-two role-playing. And I think that it is the more advantageous. Like, if I had to pick my perfect party size, it would be 3. And second place would be 2.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, the game isn't balanced for it at all. It always presents problems, and I've attempted many different solutions. Like, Paragon Mode sounds awesome. Though I also kind of like how Quinn's talking about Paragon Mode as this mecha suit that the character gets in. I imagine him telling Sinji get in the robot. And so that's great. And like, I'm trying to do an experiment now. I've talked about in the show with seeing if using dual classing, or I keep wanting to call it Gestalt, can achieve the same result. But yeah, with less people, you have more time to focus on the story. You have more time to actually showcase the what the characters want to be doing. You have more time at the table to have the combats feature them. When there's an obvious one thing missing from the 4-man group, the solutions to that problem get more interesting without it being all the solutions missing. It's not the tried and true tactics over and over and over again. And also, you do tend to shift more role-playing opportunities, less focus on combat in my experience, because they get more comfortable with each other's characters and more interaction between them. And when I have 4's okay, 5's okay, but with at 5 players, I have a hard time making sure everybody gets equal time. 6, like a Pathfinder Society group table, like I cannot give every single person that sits down at that table equal time and still get the game run in the time slot. And it's a constant juggle. And then, of course, the nightmare scenarios for me, at least, I know, this is my favorite flavor, doesn't have to be your favorite flavor, but then like the nightmare scenarios of 7, 8, 9, 10 player groups. I'm just like, no, how on earth is anybody more than a magic card at that point?
Right. The first time I ever GM'd in my whole life was for 9 people, and all I had was poster board and a Sharpie and zero concept of anything other than, wowie, this looks dope. Let's try to do this. And we got through it. A good friend of mine used to say all the time, you got behind the wheel, you drove the car, you didn't crash it into a wall. And so like we learned from there.
Yeah, Dom in our Discord in response to this episode was saying that small game groups is the exact opposite of his usual problem, but it is something he's keen to try out. And actually, Perram, before we go on, speaking of comments from our listeners, how can people that are watching us live get in touch with us if they have questions about small gaming groups?
Well, every episode of No Direction is filmed live in front of a Twitch audience. If you want to ask a question, you can do so by typing it out in chat. Periodically, we'll be getting those questions and forwarding them on to our guests. Also, if you join our Discord server, that's a great way to get us questions in advance.
Now, one of my first gaming experience was on like a school trip. So there were very few of us that were actually there to game, and so the GM just allowed us each to make 2 characters. Has anyone got any experience where you just hand extra characters to the players to make up for there not being enough players around the table, but you have the number of characters you're expected to have?
Yes, there was a point in time right before I moved to Kansas City where it was a friend of mine GMing and then myself and one other person. And that was like all that remained of that gaming group. So we ended up just, when we started a game, we rolled 2 characters with the stipulation that like those 2 characters had some form of relationship coming in, and they weren't just like the overt, here's the mechanics, we got everything we need, yeah. And I was like, it was like a slayer from a tribal society, and then using the Pathfinder First Edition rules for a custom race, ostensibly a not Telthor creature from Forgotten Realms. And like they traveled together, and the other person made like a rogue and a barbarian that were in a relationship, and like one was trying to get the other away from like bad situation at home. And so we've come to Adventureland, and it makes a very different sort of role-playing mode. Oftentimes you're I don't know how to phrase this, role-playing on a Switch, I suppose. Like it would be more important for this character to talk right now. This character is off doing this thing, and then like GM makes sure that other character also has things going on that's important for them and what they are trying to do, that kind of thing, which is a bit more of a juggle, but I guess not really in the grand sense of like there are literally 2 less bodies at the table, so the same amount of time is being spent. It's just rather than ABCD, it's ABAB.
So in my particular sorry, go ahead, Quinn.
In my experience with it it's like the overhead that it takes to sort of like juggle and sort of balance the other character. Like I've done it, and if someone is into the like kind of has a good grasp of the rules and is sort of into that part of it, like sometimes that can work and be really fun because we sort of bounce back and sort of manage that meta, which characters playing, and then or running the stats for 2 characters. But unless they're really for that, I tend to sort of shy away because it's like quite a bit. At that point, there, if one person's managing multiple characters, they're almost sort of doing what the GM is doing, right? And then that often gets messy. A lot of paperwork.
So that actually reflects something that Raising Rune Lords was asking in chat, and what is the panel's opinion on the GM PC? And that also kind of reflects my experience where, like I said, the GM let us have multiple characters each, but there was kind of like this is your character and this is your character's friend, and he would take over the friend if the scene really called for it, so you weren't role-playing with yourself, and you weren't just having 2 people with the exact same opinion moving towards the same goal at the same time.
That's a solution that I tend to lean on as the solution for my groups a lot too. And I found that the character overhead part, build them out first, like make them like just NPC sidekicks is what I prefer, because it gives the tone. Like the PC's the star of the show. These are the helpers that they can recruit into their party, Mass Effect style. And one of the ways that I've done it, if I'm not having them control the characters, is I build them as NPCs using the simplified rules. So instead of this giant thing that they're supposed to keep leveling up and keeping track of equipment, it's like, here is your other party members. They can do these 4 things in combat. They're kind of like game pieces. That's easier for the character to wrap their head around having this many extra things instead of 4 complete character sheets with all the intricacies that could be involved in that.
That's actually a really good thing actually to use. I found for like normal size groups too, like for like when I like include like an NPC go like I don't want to manage a whole other character, so I just go, cool, you have this NPC with you, and they like, have these skills, or they have like a couple of like combat abilities, and you can like call them or like get their aid and get like a +1 or something, and then simplify it.
A very good way to manage it. My relationship with the DMPC is a very like up and down one, because I've been on the side of it as a player where the DM made the DMPC for that reason, but we've actually showed up to, hey guys, look how cool my build is. Oh, it beat the combat that I built for it to beat again. Wow. And like at the same time, I often find myself stuck between I have parties who want to adopt everybody who I make and carry them around. And like, are you sure? I don't want to take the glory away. But all right, sure, here we go. So like oftentimes I will have them built up anyway, partially because I have a lot of builds in the back of my head, and I can very easily be like, oh, you're a XY? Dope. Google Sheet. And then like, here is the thing, and I will roll for it. Oftentimes when I use it, I feel like I'm taking glory away from my players. If they ask, certainly. I find I hit my own disconnect, which I'm kind of working on. I'm putting a video out about it. Friday, I believe, is when I'm shooting for that video to come out, for how to like help players who aren't quite noticing things. And I think a way that I want to start doing that is include the GMPC who's helpful in the sense of like, I see something the party should be doing. The party is not quite making that connection. GMPC sees it and is like, hey, why don't we do this? Or, hey, this plan might not be the smartest. Here's why, to fill in that sort of gap, especially again with smaller parties who like sometimes one false move can be, well, we didn't have a cleric, mystic, oracle, whatever your setting is, and now we're in danger.
Chat is talking. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
How do you handle when you have low party members, not just the pure math, but they don't have the verbs that they need? Like if your solo character is a fighter with very little skill points, most adventures assume that there's knowledge, skill being rolled, diplomacy is happening, rogue. Like the rogue class needs to be almost seems like it needs to be justified that it exists. To have all these weird traps and stuff and dungeons and stuff are always included. And there's always going to be something. And when you get it down to solo or two, how do you handle when they just don't have the tool? How does what do you compensate?
So two quick ones. One sort of Paragon mode specifically, and then like just general. The Paragon mode thing is actually, that's sort of one of the feats are for like using sort of what I was doing with my son. His friend Rodolfo has kind of like a combat, the helping stab one, where he sort of just auto stabs things. But then he also has a feat called Tools of the Trade, where he basically can make like a stealth, thievery, and like another role for him. So he's got this sort of buddy who he can be like, hey, Rodolfo, pick that lock, right? And again, Rodolfo's not a full character, and he's like essentially kind of mechanically bolted on, but with a narrative fix for why he can now have those skills. And so like that's was a good way that I found to like get him those extra skills he needs. And then in a general sense, I found maybe using like sometimes I kind of try and stretch where skills sort of go. Like I'd be very, I suddenly get very like loose on skills that might be able to sort of, all of a sudden something like athletics does a whole lot, right? To like, break things and just be more open with interpretation for the characters.
Well, I was just thinking about how you've got the X-Men comics, and they'll be dealing with civil rights allegories and a lot of really complicated issues, and then you've got Wolverine solo comics where he's dealing with things that need a good stabbing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. certainly altering what the fighter is going to go up against will make that, like, probably if it's just a fighter, don't leave this weird gargoyle head with a big old open mouth, and if you put your hand in it, that hand no longer exists. Maybe that trap's not great for them, but like solving the problems with brute force is also like certainly helpful, and like 9 times out of 10 I feel like will work. I also like, so far as the missing diplomacy goes, and this may be because I've had a fair share of players who like will have to stop session for 5 minutes as I explain to them that like diplomacy is not mind control. Here's why, that kind of thing. They're just like, use your words, friend. They will help you. And like, people can talk to people for help in things in town. And especially in APs, I feel like there's a lot of foreshadowing for like, you're probably going to go up against enemy typing, doot. And most places that my parties end up going, I generally will, and this is because I have a lot of like people at my tables. I say it all the time. I really like it when my players are smarter than I am, because they'll invent the most dumb solutions to their problems, and like it should work mechanically IRL, therefore good. So like a thing I try to do often is the inclusion of like a library, right? Somewhere where somebody can go and just, I know that today I will be fighting demons, but I don't know anything about them. And then like go do that research, realize you need silver or good weapons, the various weaknesses as like detailed by some chronicler somewhere kind of thing, such that the person without the religion checks at the table is still able to deal with those without it just being like this kind of crappy gotcha because you didn't have the thing, now you don't know, and oopsie.
Chat was talking about leadership. Now 2E doesn't have leadership in the same sense that 1E had it. Leadership. Perram? Oh, I thought you were asking for a timeout. You're just using a crucifix to keep leadership away.
We heard leadership, and in our hearts of hearts,
leadership in 2E feels like it's a lot of the advice we're getting super codified into a really complicated version of what we're talking about. Is there any advantage to using leadership instead of just a little more eyeballing it, a little more hand waving it?
I mean, I think if the players are down to have extra character sheets worth of things, I'm totally fine with it. I very distinctly remember a time in my life when I was a player in a game with 3 other people, and the people who I started playing Pathfinder with, we played competitive Magic before as sort of a preface to when the GM let our cohorts take leadership when they got to 7th, and we can all see the pyramid, right? As that begins to just, oh, wowie, he's level 7. He has another friend. What do you mean the CR13 big bad just nuked them in one shot? Sadness. But I think it can be rewarding. I have enjoyed it when I have used it for the sake of like, it can bring a little bit of like injection o life into a campaign in additions that had leadership. Cause I often have people at my tables who will like, in the way back, hey, this book came out. Wow, this looks cool. I want to build it. And then like, so they do. That kind of thing. Also, this happened in one of my groups just wrapped Iron Fang Invasion not too terribly long ago. And I don't necessarily want to spoil it because it was so like out of left field that this particular creature showed up in Iron Fang Invasion. And there's literally a thing in book 4, where it's like, this person, if you don't murder them when you turn the corner, qualifies for leadership. And I had a bard at the table who wasn't like, they didn't feel like they were keeping up with the like hunter and their war cat and the like big angry blaster sorcerer. So like throwing leadership down on the table gave them a thing that they enjoyed. So if everybody's down, it definitely can fill in the gaps. And also like be fun. Just like there's an asterisk there where be fun. Disclaimer, that fun can rapidly turn into, and then me and Perram's crucifixes go flying real fast.
I like Lava being in chat said Perram is using the X card. So I have had one positive experience with leadership, and it's when just whenever we'd go to the town, the players would be allowed to do whatever they wanted. And one of my players just never really seemed to know what she wanted to do. And so I just had an assassin try and take her out in an alley just to give her some spotlight. And she subdued this assassin, had him taken away by guards. And then whenever they were back in town, visited her assassin in jail, chatted him up. Like, this just became her main reason to come to town. And eventually she was like, can I take leadership and gain him as a follower? And like, at that point, he'd had his own voice, he had his own perspective. And it's like, sure, I know you are definitely not taking this feat to abuse the system and the army of followers that comes along with it. You just have this relationship with this cohort. You want to explore it further a little mechanically. I'm happy with that. And it ended up working really well.
Fine line exists between role-playing, making friends with your assassin, and 150 commoners to do the railgun meme.
Chat also from Wifflepossum says, what does everyone think about playing Gestalt characters in 1E and 2E? Perram, you were briefly mentioning Gestalt characters earlier.
Yeah. So for 1E, I have a lot of experience with Gestalt characters, and they are messy. They're a messy, blunt force solution to the problem. They're fun. You're definitely... Honestly, they did Mythic better than Mythic does Mythic, I think. Definitely more game balanced as well than 1E Mythic. And
I wonder if at this point we need to explain what Mythic is. What is our ratio of listeners that are just new to Pathfinder from 2E?
So Mythic is a thing that was very poorly put together, and it took this wonderful adventure where you went into the world wound and made it woefully. I GM'd the first 3 books of that.
Exact. That's when everybody stops. It's book 3.
Oh, I feel the exact opposite about like Gestalt characters. It's a wonderful thing and very fun. And that was my first characters were Gestalt characters. And that's because we came from a very like optimizing thing. I wouldn't necessarily build them all the time because it feels very unauthentic. Is that the word?
I find that players like there's players that are super in Gestalt, and to explain what Gestalt is, you take your character doesn't have a character class. They pick 2 character classes and merge them into the best of both worlds. So you look at any 2 of their stats and take the better one. So this class fighter has great hit points, wizard has bad hit points. Take the good hit point option. You don't add the hit points together. And it helps solve the verb problem I mentioned earlier, so that you can cover the roles you don't have by having that second class bolted on, so that all the bard skills suddenly are added to the ranger, and that's fun. I do find that some players don't enjoy Gestalt because they wanted to really play a specific class fantasy, and they don't want to be forced to dilute that. So like, I really wanted to be the ranger, and Gestalting fighter doesn't do anything to ranger very good. Your Gestalt, really, you only get the benefit when you grab something that is drastically different and bolted on. With 2E, I think that works better because there's much more explicit things you get when you combine even similar classes together. And it still is probably more powerful to grab an opposite class, but the system seems to be kind of designed to let those 2 things play together very well. It definitely just opens up more options, and I'm liking it how it plays better in 2E in the experiment game I'm running, where 2 characters are trying to run through what would be balanced for 4 players, a custom campaign I'm putting together.
Do you find the dual class helps in the like sort of the combat encounter? You were talking about the verb problem. It definitely seems that it would solve that, but like in the combat, does the extra ability make up for the action economy and stuff?
It does a little bit. I'm finding that they're definitely missing. They're not as durable as they should be, which is why I kind of like what I'm hearing from Paragon. They have less weaknesses though. What you end up with is like every save's a good save. Every AC is good. Everybody has good AC. Everybody has accurate attacks and stuff. So they're definitely better than a single class character would be in just pretty much all regards. But it's not. They're still getting swarmed action economy wise. I have to be careful with that. So I'm definitely leaning more towards the 1 and 2 big monsters as opposed to the complete opposite of my usual advice of add lots of weak things. This can be very bad for small groups.
Oh, yeah.
But offensively, there's almost no gain, almost no offensive gain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, Tom.
I was just gonna say, like, in my experience, Gestalt is a little less like you are more powerful and a little more like you have more resources that you can expend before, like, you absolutely must go, like, we are taking a nap right now. If we don't, the wizard is chasing us with his staff and we're all in danger. Like, such that you can get a little farther forward, like when the sorcerer is out of spell slots, then the sorcerer X champion draws their long sword and in we go to push a little bit farther. But yeah, no, you can definitely still like swarm the action economy, which I feel will always be the king in any kinds of like how to design encounters, who has the more things.
Also, you say that Gestalt solves the verb problem, but I find it creates a noun problem. In that it's like, I'm playing a druid bard mishmash. Yeah. Like the core concept of the character you're playing gets really muddy.
That is true.
You at that point, I mean, it was actually less of a big deal in 3.5 before Pathfinder when almost nobody pure classed anything. Mm-hmm. Like, why would you ever single class in 3.5? Like, it was bad choice all around.
For sure.
And Gestalt in first edition definitely had more of an effect because I found that almost all characters that I played with did single class. They would grab archetypes, of course, because archetypes are wonderful, but they would single class to 20. Very few people I've seen have multi-classed in 1E, and when they did, it was for very specific character builds. Like, this is a character concept I need to make, and it's impossible with a single class with an archetype. As opposed to second edition, where I'm thinking everybody's multi-classing in second edition.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like the Gestalt building blocks into it, like when Age of Ashes came out, when it was like brand new, we got a small handful of sessions in before like we decided to brew Gestalt into E, which ended up looking ostensibly the same as the dual class rules came out, because like the building blocks are much easier to move into place in 2E, such that like I don't really ever foresee myself, unless people just like they don't want to do it, in which case so be it, where I run a 2E game that isn't either dual class or the free archetype rules, which is kind of similar and also I suppose could help out with the smaller party if you take the gets good at stealth archetype that I don't know what is, but you do. And like now suddenly the barbarian is a little less taxed to do the thing that the ranger wants to do.
Quinn, I feel like you were trying to get something in there.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think the interesting thing that in Pathfinder 2, what I've been finding is that so we've talked about action economy, right? But the numbers are like per level are very, very tight, right? Like, you know, like a plus, like, you know, +1, a +2 makes like a huge difference, right? Like, well, watch like someone get like debuff a monster right into crit range, right? And like crit on the next rolls, all that kind of stuff. And so like I have one group, you know, I play with my son, but I also have a group that's like 3 players. And one of the things that I did for them was to actually just the only tweak I make is just giving them items just a touch earlier. Like we have like a 3rd level barbarian, and I gave him a striking weapon. As it turns out, having one of those at 3rd level makes it on a barbarian like a striking great axe. It's pretty good.
You don't say. Yeah.
It's kind of like having a 4th person, right? You know, like it just like the numbers are so tight that if you just push them a little bit, sometimes that just makes it makes a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. I was running Fall of Plaguestone for a little while, and we were doing free archetype in that. And before they unfortunately had to drop, I had oh gosh, I think primary class was fighter, secondary was cleric. Secondary was definitely cleric, and it was of the dwarven war god Angrad. So the strat was so often just magic weapon, my great axe,
Ugh.
and then like that wolf is just done.
I was just talking to Jason Keeley, who's going to be running an actual play, and he needed convincing about the free archetype special rule. And I'm just trying to find what I said there because I made a very convincing argument. There we go. Main arguments are that free archetypes add mechanical and thematic complexity to characters without having to weight level or sacrifice a precious resource to qualify for it.
Mm.
And I do still feel that way. I feel that an archetype, especially if you're not just doing one of the multi-classing archetypes, adds a dimension to the character and adds a reason. Like, you have to justify why you've got this second archetype from first level, because it's not something you grew into. It's something that you always were. It's as much part of your identity as your ancestry background and your class. And I find the thought experiment alone of justifying some of the free archetypes adds dimension to my characters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, especially one of the side effects I've noticed with archetypes in second edition having to wait for second levels is characters are building their first level characters with that in mind. It's like, I'm building a character that's this, and it's a fighter with the lore master archetype. And he's a very bookish fighter. He's just very, very bad at it for 14 encounters.
Right? Yeah.
Well, and even then when he gets good at it, he's bad at the main thing he already was. Like, just the sacrifice of that second level class feat is huge just to qualify for the concept that you wanted your character to have.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Especially if you're not making a power choice. Like, that sacrifice is almost always worth it if you're multi-classing, because the pure power you get from a multi-class choice is usually better than any single feat you could take at second level.
But what if I want to be a celebrity?
Oh,
Exactly.
God.
We are coming up on our hour. We've gone through our chat questions. So chat, if you have anything, last things that you want to ask our guests, Quinn and Tommy, get them in now. Perram, any other last talking points you want to get through?
I wondered, when you are doing the solo game, how important is it that you do customize the adventure? I understand with Paragon Mode, like, one of the testing it out to make sure it works is to run it as is. But do you think that when you do have like small groups, 1, 2, 3, that you should like take a Sharpie or post-it notes to those adventures?
So the other thing that I'm working on here is my thinking of again with a sort of smaller group things is kind of it changes the complexion of like why we're playing. Like in when I'm playing with my son, we want to sort of see what happens and stuff that is interesting in the group rules, like the dying rules, right? If it's just you, it's not really those things add tension. Like, oh man, the fighter just dropped. Can like the cleric get there and keep them up, right? Like none of that interplay exists really, and really we want to just either decide we don't want to play anymore, but likely we just want to sort of go to a new kind of like, okay, I just got defeated, right? And so one of the things I sort of like, one of the big things I've changed is sort of like there's none of the normal dying rules. You just sort of get defeated, and then it sort of, you know, giving sort of guidance and rules for like, okay, how do you evolve the story after your solo BC just got their, you know, butt kicked in a fight. Right. And so I think that's like one of the main things that needs tweaking in that format. And also loot, right? You know, like if the AP is designed to give stuff to 4 players, you know, you can turn that into an advantage, right? Just making, you know, okay, cool, I've got all this money and all this stuff, and now I'm stronger, but that, you know, it might get to be a bit much.
I feel like one of Paragon Mode's strengths is that if you've got a group of people that are interested in playing and none of their schedules line up, you can have everyone's solo movie building up to that Avengers movie where everyone actually does have the chance to get together. And then suddenly you've got these storied characters that are all meeting up for the first time and realizing how they play off of each other. And it would just, I'd love to see how that dynamic would play out in like basically a Marvel MCU phase.
Yeah, you could use it to do preludes and stuff like that.
Sounds like a very logical like thing to have in your back pocket as well, given that like life and work and car problems and internet problems and like other things that can and will get in the way of your gaming time do happen, such that sometimes you didn't realize you were going to be short an important like somebody for the thing, and now you have 2 or 3 people in your party. I could see Paragon Mode be like, oh, okay, cool, flip this switch. It's all about you for the next 3 hours, buddy. And then we go do whatever the bard wanted to get up to that the champion has been forbidding for like 6 sessions, and on we go.
You can also see a group that can only get together once a month doing Paragon Mode play-by-posts to pass the time and flesh out what the characters are doing.
Ooh, yeah.
I do notice that the Paragon Mode would be exceptionally funny if everyone was ninjas, because as soon as there's just one left, they become super strong.
You know what? One of the things I've been going for the like sort of the Wolverine loner type, like I work best alone, like kind of the narrative sort of that I have in my head is been like, actually when I'm with you all, like you kind of hold me back, right? I'm like, I'm better by myself, right? Like I can do more stuff when it's just me, and I'm like so self-reliant, like groups sort of slow me down a little. So
it seems like an interesting mechanic to use like on the GM side as well, if you want to make a fight go on a little longer. Like when you get down to the last whatever is important in that particular encounter, it kicks on, like, or I guess rather you behind the screen kick on Paragon Mode and then describe whatever that looks like to the party as Cell has not reached Cell's final form yet, kind of thing.
All right, looks like chat doesn't have any last questions. So thank you both for coming on. This was a lively discussion, and I do think that it went to directions that just a conversation between Perram and I wouldn't have gone. So I value that and what you both brought to this conversation. So thank you for that. Yeah, and if there's anything you'd like to shout out to, now is your chance. We'll start with Quinn. Quinn, what are you up to?
I am doing sort of talking about Paragon Mode and other Pathfinder stuff, QH_Murphy on Twitter. And also I'll announce the Paragon Mode when it's released in the next week or two there. And then the one thing I wanted to like shout out was something from my friend Aaron King, Patchwork World 6th edition. It's a really cool sort of Powered by the Apocalypse fantasy game. It's fun, it's clever, it's delightful, so it's definitely worth checking out.
I accidentally posted both of your links in chat, so Patrick World just got linked, and Tammy, the YouTube channel link that you sent me is also in there. So oops.
Excellent, good enough.
So why don't you explain what I just linked to, Tommy?
So that thing, if you follow that link, it'll take you to this dude with funny colored hair who's still playing 1E and wants to tell you all about it, and like a bunch of other things as well. I basically cover all of the Paizo systems at this point, 1st edition, 2nd edition, Starfinder. I'm the community, both the YouTube side and the podcast side, from what I'm seeing in our Discord, is trying to like grow up. There's a lot of really cool people in the Pathfinder YouTube sphere. I'm honored to be one of them. We do lots and lots of videos about lots and lots of things. And I guess I also want to say, like, I'm super stoked to have been able to come on No Direction, because there's definitely a point in my career where I'm like watching y'all's stuff during the playtest, like, wow, these are the big kids, ooh wee, and then like now we're hanging out and playing Vermintide and stuff. So it has been incredibly humbling, and I truly appreciate it.
That Vermintide game's on our Twitch channel, right, Perram?
Yeah, it's on the VOD. We haven't published that one because the video on the first half of that is kind of meh. So definitely go watch it if you want. We're going to do a mulligan on that one next week and try it again.
We all had our stuff set up for recording, not streaming, and then we
it's like, it turned out the demands of 4 people talking head on Twitch is much different than the same demands for high frame rate, heavy CPU usage video game.
Right? Who'd have thunk it? Not us.
Perram, I'm ready to transition. I don't know what we're transitioning to. Did you have a banter topic, or did you just want to go into wrap-ups and shout-outs?
We'll just do the wrap-ups and shout-outs.
Okay. All right. So once again, Quinn and Tommy, thank you both for joining us. And to our listeners, we will be right back to wrap things up right after this.
Wrap-ups and shout-outs. Wrap-ups and shout-outs. Wrap-ups. Wrap-ups and shout-outs.
And we're back.
Thank you for joining us for episode 249 of No Direction, the No Direction Network's Pathfinder news, reviews, and interviews podcast. Thank you again to Quinn Murphy and Tommy, our guests for the small group gaming conversation. Perram, where are you?
The camera problems. It's solved already.
Okay, great. Before we go, we'd like to shout out to some things that we think people would appreciate getting. We'd like to bring our attention to. Let me start that over. We would like to bring your attention to some things that are of interest to us that we think you would appreciate. Starting with the network shout out. I usually like to shout out something that came out since the last episode that I think are deserves a little extra attention. Today I'm shouting out to today's episode of Game Design Unboxed. It is about Bosk, and it is with, let me make sure I'm getting her last name right. Her first name is Erica, and I know her from the Canadian board gaming scene. Erica Bouyaris. She is one of the Toronto game designers. She has a really interesting story in that she got into game design late, but because Toronto has such just a powerhouse scene of game designers like Daryl Andrews and Eric Lang, and she got mixed in there and just assumed that their insane output of content was what game designers do. She has basically just leveled up incredibly quickly, and now she has all kinds of game design credits, including several licensed games like the Steven Universe card game and the upcoming, Scott Pilgrim, the Scott Pilgrim miniatures game that's coming out from Renegade. So she's a delightful person. She is an incredible game design talent, and she has a really fun conversation with Danielle, Ben, and Denise. So if you haven't checked out Game Design Unboxed, I know it's different from the rest of the content on the No Direction Network, but we're all gamers of all different kinds. I'm definitely a tabletop gamer, a tabletop board gamer, and Game Design Unboxed really focuses on that area of the hobby. And I appreciate it, and this episode is a particularly good example of the kind of conversations that they have.
One of the first shout outs I want to make is for Concurrent. I've shouted out this before, but it's coming up soon. Concurrent is going to be June 11th through 13th, and I am one of the celeb DMs or GMs for that one. I am running a slot that still has a couple of seats open. If somebody wants to join in and play, I am running at Saturday, June 12th at 8 p.m. Eastern till 1 a.m. Enter the Pallid Peak. So if anybody wants to join my Enter the Pallid Peak game, you should hurry because there's only 2 seats left.
Speaking of cons, according to No Direction Network's official PaizoCon countdown correspondent Darren Caldemeyer, there are 23 days until PaizoCon Online 2021. We've been doing a lot of last-minute organizing for our part in it, which we will be on-air personalities. We will be doing some of the hosting of some of the segments, the panels. We'll be hosting some of the panels, but largely we are hands-off on the production side of it, which I'm curious to see how that plays out this year. I wonder if we're just going to be super chill about everything.
I hope so, because I was so much stress making the tech work on that.
You earned a PaizoCon off, and by off I mean you were doing the job of a single person instead of the job of multiple people.
Right. I'm probably still going to be pulling similar number of hours.
Yes, but it's hours
but I won't
in a linear way. You're not doing these overlapping hours of jobs that you usually do.
And definitely not like the 30 plus hours I spent before that making sure the tech works, staying up till 4 a.m. with Paizo crew, making sure it all worked.
Yeah, no, you can show up day of.
I know, right? I just need to worry, like, do I have my shirt ready?
We have to get John a shirt.
Yeah, we have to get John a shirt. But it's coming! Yay! My next shout out, I want to shout out to what I'm really shouting out to is one of my favorite artists, which is Art of Sandara. It is, oh my gosh, this is the most comfy, wholesome, cool, cute dragon and various fantasy thing I have ever seen. I'm very love on it, and I'm pulling it up now on screen so y'all can see, even though for some reason all my stuff is broken. There we go. But this is Sandara's art. It's always like fantasy worlds, but dragons are real common, and everything is just quaint and wonderful. And they're doing a board game featuring their art, be called Flamecraft here. It's going to have those same little cute dragons as tokens, and I'm super hyped to just get it. I just love this artist so much, and they deserve more attention.
Do you know anything about the game?
Absolutely nothing. I know it's going to be about using dragons to solve commonplace problems in a small fantasy town. So it's like the dragon that is used to make tea. This is the one we use to flambe. This is the one that helps flowers grow. It's like not going to be like action fighty. It's going to be how would magic and cool little cute dragons help a fantasy economy work. I've lost audio from you, Ryan.
Sorry, that's because I was tapping on my light because I lost my light a second ago. I was saying I'm thinking of picking this up. This looks really cool. It's by Board Game Academy, which I don't know as a publisher. But looking over their BGG site, 2 to 5 players, which is perfect for me. I usually have 5 players at my game nights. 30 to 60 minutes. This is a nice medium weight game to transition into after our icebreaker. So, and the theme and the art are both things that are going to be really easy to convince people that this is the next game we want to play. I even want to give it a couple of tries to see if I could play it with my kids. The weights, there is no weight rating at the time. It is age 14 plus, but that could just mean they didn't want to do the test to make sure that none of the things are choking hazards. So legally they have to say it's 14 plus, but I bet I could get Scarlett to get into this game.
Is Scarlett prone to choking hazards?
No, she's not.
Good.
Neither of them are. Don't worry.
I was horribly prone to choking hazards.
Oh, no. I'll tell you a story in the Patron's Private Sanctum about not choking hazards, but anyway, it's in this area. But before we get to that, I do want to shout out to a podcast. It's not the next one on my listening, because I usually do a shout out alphabetically down my Podcast Addict subscriptions. But this one is one that I may have even shouted out to before. It's the Loaded Dice Rollers. And
Ooh.
They are an actual play podcast that records in a bar in Hollywood. And so they often bring in celebrity guests to do NPC voices. They've started a new series called After the Fellowship because they are between seasons of their actual play podcast. And they are bringing in people from the gaming community. And they play Pathfinder games. So their first guest was Mark Moreland. And it's a really interesting conversation because it's a combination of an interview. No, it's not even an interview. It's they take a guest, they take one of the members of their actual play podcast, they put them together and they say, just have a conversation about gaming. And so it goes in interesting directions you don't expect it to go in if it was an interview, because it's a little more chill, it's a little more casual and a little more personal. And I really enjoyed it. We've talked to Mark Moreland several times over the years, but I definitely got to hear different things from him in this interview that went out today. So it's the Loaded Dice Rollers podcast. They're After the Fellowship series. And the first episode has Mark Moreland in it. And spoilers, the next episode has me in it.
Ooh. I want to give a shout out. This one's kind of a selfish shout out. Cause
How dare you?
So it is to One Page Rules. I shouted out to some couple of war games before, but I continue my journey down the indie wargaming scene. And One Page Rules is basically trying to distill the cool parts of wargaming into something that could be played in an hour really quickly. And the gimmick is that the core rules, not the full rules, but like the core, all you need to know to play fits on the front and back of one page of paper, one A4, because European and most wargaming, it's all A4s and A6s and etc. I have been doing work with them lately, helping get their products ready for print on demand, but I'm only doing that because I really love it. The rules, they have basically quote unquote not Warhammer 40k and not Warhammer Age of Sigmar versions. It's kind of their thing, but they also have a bunch of cool original games like War Fleets and just a various what they do on game jams, where they just try to invent a game in a day, and then the best of those get added to the list of games you can just go check out. They've got a cool Patreon where that funds them getting artists to make 3D printed printable miniatures and 2D printable miniatures to play the games. And overall, it's a great scene, and most of it's free. It's like the core rules of the game, all the army lists, everything you need to actually play the game, and even black and white miniatures to print out for all the armies. If you wanted to play this tomorrow, you could just get your printer going and be able to do so.
I am out of shoutouts. Perram, you ready to tell people about Patron's private sanctum?
Indeed, because actually, yes. If you want to, I am tongue-tied today.
Same.
We would like to thank all of our patrons that help support the show and help it grow and make all this possible. And one of the benefits of being a patron is the Patron's Private Sanctum, the after-party show that takes place after every No Direction, where we hang out with our patrons on Discord and talk about what you all ask us to talk about. It's a show for the patrons, directed by the patrons. And then it's become one of my favorite aspects of the network is hanging out and just talking about the random cool stuff in that. It's almost like the bar chat at PaizoCon once a week or once every 2 weeks.
Yeah, and the last couple of episodes I had trouble getting out on time because I was busy and sick, and I've fixed that. So the last episode that we recorded is up on the Patreon now. Mm-hmm. The episode before that we recorded is edited, and I'm going to wait a couple of days just to put a little space in between. Probably release tonight's before I release that one. So that one's episode 18. And then after that, I'm caught up.
Yay! If you want to become a patron and participate, you can do so by going to nodirectionpodcast.com and clicking on the Patreon link there. Once you do that, just connect your Discord account to the Patreon, and you'll be able to join us live if you want to join us in here in just a few minutes. And for those of you who don't want to or aren't able to make it live, the recordings are posted to our Patreon. We appreciate all our patrons. It's only through your support that the network is able to do what it does. Just recently, it helped us get hard drives so that we can back up the show's getting really big. It takes up so much more space lately. And so we needed hard drives and backups.
Yeah. Mine arrived. I have not installed it yet. So that's probably a weekend plan. That's
what I was about to say. That's a weekend project, and I haven't had a weekend free yet.
Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perram.
And if you want to find the path, you need no direction.